All right. I hope everybody is doing well, and thank you for joining me for a Wednesday Bible study. I'm going to jump right into it today. I probably will be with you longer than I usually am, just because of the subject matter and just a couple of things we want to go over and make sure we cover. I never forget a great Bible teacher. He always said you want to make sure you define your terms, right? And so this is one of those issues whereby which we want to make sure that we're communicating properly, because it is a very sensitive matter. And so not you want to cover every subject matter, but right, properly, correct? But because this is a sensitive matter, we want to make sure we define our terms, kind of flesh things out so that it's beneficial to people and that it's God honoring. And so we don't want to take a political approach to this whole topic of abortion, but we want to take a biblical approach to this particular matter. And so we're going to do that this evening, and prayerfully we'll do it well. Feel free to share this. Feel free to engage in the chat room. Would love to engage with you. Again, in a study, it's not a monologue, and so if we can dialogue in any way, I am open to any criticism. Again, this is something we want to make sure that we kind of talk about and flesh out in a proper way. All right. Oh, thank you, Miss Linda. Good to see you this evening, and thank you for joining me. I'm always appreciative for those who have joined in. Thank you for my brother Fred has shared this, so I appreciate that. My wife is checking in, so if you are here, feel free to check in, and again, be prepared to answer any questions that you have. Just place them right in the chat, and we will dive right in. So, topic tonight. The topic is the whole issue of abortion, right? And so, abortion is one of those topics that never goes away. It is something that is always around. It's always hanging around. And the reason being is because of the nature of the matter. And so when you think about abortion, I think it's clear for us to understand abortion is a big deal. Abortion is controversial because of its conclusion, right? Remember, death is synonymous with abortion. And we're talking about abortion. When we talk about abortion, we're talking about the abortion of a child, a baby, right, in a mother's womb. And there are so many things surrounding this whole issue of abortion. It's like a 10-headed monster, right? And so, you're talking about abortion as it pertains to contraception. And what we mean by that is those who might engage in sexual activity, they have a baby, and then they don't want the baby. And so the way by which they do away with the baby is through abortion. We're talking about incest, right? Those who engage in illicit sexual activity, whereby which a baby is produced and the child, they may want to do away with the baby, right? There's rape scenarios. There's all sorts of scenarios that are attached to abortion. And so I think what we want to do is, again, we want to stay away from the political aspects of it all, right? And we do have to somehow get into it a little bit as it pertains to this whole issue of rights. And rights is one of those things that pushes into the realm of God, the kingdom of God. When we talk about what are your rights, that does lend itself to discussing theology, right? What does God have to say? And rights and life go hand in hand. So those are some other things that we need to make sure that we connect, right? We need to connect those dots. So abortion is this controversial thing because of its conclusion. The conclusion of abortion is death. Therefore, it is a big deal. And so death is synonymous with abortion because there is no other outcome for abortion. And I think one of the greatest issues we have with this whole thing of abortion is we all know what it is. And what I mean by that is we all know, again, the great conclusion. The great conclusion is there is this death is the end result of this particular thing. And if we work this thing all the way backwards, it is death on a life, right? So there is a life that exists, and the life that exists, a decision is made for that life that exists, right? So then we tread on the issue of human rights, all right? And so many people argue that, you know, a baby inside the womb is not a human. So we're going to kind of delve into all of these types of things and just kind of discuss them, as I said again, in a very biblical manner. So the other great problem we have is our treatment, right, of this right or wrong issue, right? It's how we treat this issue. Oftentimes, we don't address it as we should, or in the serious nature that as we should. We're very selective as it pertains to death that comes upon this particular child, right? So, you know, we talk about civil rights and how everybody is due their civil rights. We talk about all other sorts of human rights and how people are due their human rights. But when it comes to a baby, we become very selective, right? Science becomes our parent as opposed to our innateness, meaning what we know about being human. And so that's a very dangerous, that's a very slippery slope, because if you take that position in one area, then you can also apply that position in another area. Some countries do euthanasia, right? Some companies, some countries, right, believe in the death of senior citizens. And so you have to recognize these slippery slopes and how you're set up for these slippery slopes when you come into this position of the baby and it not being able to being a human, right? So those are some things we need to understand, all right? So let's start and be very logical with this whole thing, all right? So here's the first thing I think we need to first understand. One of the reasons I'm speaking about this too is because of what has taken place in Texas. In Texas, there was a bill that was passed just recently, and I actually want to pull that up here. And so as you can see, this is the bill that was passed in Texas, Texas Senate Bill number 8. And what it does is it discusses who can have an abortion, right? And it's giving you the whole Roe versus Wade. We're going to touch on that too. But what it's talking about is the nature of the child, right? It gives you definitions. Fetal heartbeat means cardiac activity or steady and repetitive rhythmic contraction of fetal heart within the gestational sac. So there, a lot of this is good. All right, I'm not going to deny that fact. As a believer, I do believe that a baby, once a woman conceives, you now have a baby. Once the sperm and the egg meet, you have a human being. And we're going to look at that from scripture as well. We're going to look directly at the scripture and see how that's communicated. A very familiar passage of scripture that God has communicated. And you'll say, wow, I didn't think of it that way. But that is God's intent. We're going to talk about how when a sperm meets an egg, you have a human. All right. So I want to get that out the way. But just wanted to show you where you can find this bill or what the bill is entitled. And so you can go through and read it. Very short. I think if you ever want to be well versed on anything, you first at least have to read and do some degree of investigation and kind of find out how people are defining their terms. Look what they do. They go through and they define their terms, right? A begins with first fertilization. B occurs when the woman is carrying and developing human offspring. They go all the way. They give you definitions for everything. 7, unborn child means a human fetus or embryo in any stage of gestation from fertilization unto birth. Now, I got to give it to them. That is a biblical communication, right? That footnote right there, number 7, that is a biblical communication straight from the scriptures. All right. Now, I think what happens is, and as you look at this bill, there are some things that may not have been taken into consideration. All right. As we talked about earlier, there are some scenarios that can happen whereby which an abortion is necessary. Okay. Now, let me clarify myself before people think I'm for abortion. You have to take into consideration a woman who might be having a child, and I wish my wife was in here because she's like the doctor, right? She knows quite a bit, and so we talk about these things, and she can just kind of spit these things out quickly. But one thing I think we need to be aware of is there are situations whereby which a woman is put into a position medically. It could be her own child, a husband, wife, they're having a baby, they want the baby, they're in delivery, and something happens. The doctor says we might have to do an abortion, right? Because of death might ensue on either one or the other, right? Or both. And so decisions have to be made. And so there are those particular situations that can take place. And so some of those things aren't brought into view when you look at some of these bills here, right? So in Texas, the big deal is if you can't have an abortion, right? Period. That's pretty much what it's communicating. All right. They use the terms 6 weeks. All right. Most people don't know they're pregnant by 6 weeks. That's the hard part. So if you think about it, and let's just get into it. If a couple engages in sexual activity, egg, sperm get together, they may not know, right? That woman could not find out for 4 weeks, right? First of all, that she misses a period. So now you're into the 5th week. So the 6th week, you might be just given some opportunity to find out if you're just late or you really missed the period, right? You can see I got experience with this. I have 5 kids, so I know what I'm talking about in that degree. And so 6 weeks isn't any amount of time. Now, I'm not validating what they're saying here, but what this boils down to is no abortion. All right. So let's just stay with that premise. I'll move on from that. We'll continue on, and we're going to dive into some other things as it pertains to this. But this is just available here, right, for you to view, right? So you kind of know where to go if you want to review it. Definitely check it out so you can be well versed and have conversation. Very short. It's not a big deal. It looks like it, but I'm telling you, it is not. So take a look at it when you get the opportunity. All right. Now, let's go ahead and continue on. All right. So you have this couple, they're engaging in sex, right? It's clear for us to understand that sex produced has a potential to produce an outcome. And the outcome is a child, right? And so if you fill in the blank on any question. If a male and a female engage in sexual intercourse, they have the potential to produce a blank. Now, the reason I just put that statement out there is for this particular purpose. All right. People debate whether or not a embryo, people debate whether a fetus, people debate whether an infant is a child. All right. So I want to just kind of help you to understand how your innateness has been invaded, right? So science has invaded what you already knew, your innate intelligence as it pertains to humanity, right? The one thing we need to know for sure is that we know something about being human, all right? And the reason my argument is this: we know about other things. We can speak about other things, right? One of my favorite things is watermelon, and I can tell you something about watermelon, how to pick them, how yellow meat watermelon, who has the best watermelons. That'd be Georgia, by the way. They have the best watermelons. But I know something about watermelon, although I am not a watermelon. But I know more about being a human than I do about a watermelon, right? Because humanity is innate, right? We know something about that. We have been given a prescription by God through the scriptures as it pertains to humanity. And so when I just put that statement out there, if a male and a female engage in sexual intercourse, they have potential to produce a blank. The answer is a baby, a child, right? And what I want you to see from the scriptures, by the way, first and foremost, God commands Adam and Eve to have a child. So us as believers, we need to understand that Adam and Eve has commanded us to have children, right? He tells us to be fruitful and multiply. All right. When you look at Genesis chapter 4, verses 1, there you have, you got relations, right? Adam knows his wife Eve. Then you have conception, and then you have birth to a human. I want us to just quickly take a look at Genesis chapter 4. Let me get there myself. Just one moment here. So many things to do. You just give me 2 seconds here. I'll get us to Genesis chapter 4. All right. All right. In Genesis chapter 4 here's what you see. It says, the man was intimate with his wife Eve. All right. So intimate sexual relationship. Look what it says. She's intimate. Next it says she conceived, right? Next it says she gave birth to Cain, right? And look at Eve's response. This is very, very, very important. This is what I said. This is simplistic, but this is something that you might have missed in the reading of your scripture, right? So it says, she said, I have had a male child with the Lord's help. All right. I have had a male child with the Lord's help. Now look at verse 2. It says, she also gave birth to his brother Abel. All right. Now she had 2 children that she bore. She communicates that she's had a male child with the Lord's help. She's given the credence to the Lord in regards to having this baby. Now here's the point that I want you to see. If you recall, God tells Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful, right? That's the point I want to kind of key in on. Be fruitful, and then he says multiply. All right. The multiply part you understand with no problem. Be fruitful, multiply, meaning have others. The be fruitful part, it means to reproduce. To reproduce. And here's where I want you to focus in. I want you to understand. The word sperm, right, in the Greek terminology is spermata, right? Spermata. Spermata means seed, right? Seed. And here's the beautiful picture I want you to see. A man has a seed. The woman is like the ground, right? The man's seed goes into the ground, fertilizes, and it reproduces the man's seed. What the man is reproduced. reproduced. The reason Eve said, I have had a male child. In the King James and the NASB, she says, I have had a man child. A man child. Now, stay with me real quick because I want you to understand this. Everybody is a man. All right. I'm going to say that one more time. Everybody is a man. I'm going to say it one more time because I know you're like, what? There's some lady out there saying, I am not a man. I'm going to say it one more time. Everybody is a man. You're either a man or you're a woman, right? You are still a man. The scripture talks about mankind, right? And there's variance in mankind. There's males and females, right? Woman means womb man, meaning the woman has a womb and the man does not, right? The distinction in their reproductive system actually. All right. So just trek with me here. So she says, I've had a male child with the Lord's help. She is communicating that they just reproduced what they already are, right? The seed. I want to pause right there. We talked about a man's seed, spermata, right? Sperm. All right. I want to pause right there. Think about this. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. So I want you to think about this right here. That word seed. Think of any kind of seed. I don't care what seed it is. All right. Pumpkin seed, apple seed, you name it. All right. When you go to purchase that seed, it's labeled already what kind of seed. It's letting you know what is going to grow up, right? The seed is not something else. The seed from its very beginning is what it is. It is a pumpkin. So if you go to the store and you want to buy plant pumpkin seed, you ask the person, can you show me where the pumpkin seeds are? The seed reproduces what it actually is from the very beginning. When you place a pumpkin seed into the ground, it is a pumpkin just as a seed, right? And it will, through your labor and the ground's labor, it will reproduce itself, giving off more seeds. The same thing with humanity. God has built these lessons into our entire world, right? And so the same thing with humanity. When a man's seed meets a woman's egg, the seed, right, is a man from the very beginning, right, in the actual body of the woman. And the labor, right, reproduces what that seed already actually is. Now, my whole reasoning in this is that I want you to understand that from the very beginning, you need to understand that a baby is a human, first and foremost. It is a human. Spermata, seed, right? Reproduction of what something already is. That's what we need to get. Here's the great problem I think we have. The great problem we have is with our terms, right? We use these terms loosely, not knowing what they actually mean. We use the word sperm. We use the word womb. We use the word woman. We throw that around, not understanding what you're actually communicating, right? And then you let science invade your innateness, what you already know, redefining the terms, right? Telling you that a fetus is not a human. Who told them that? And what gave them the right to come up with that degree of science? And let me pause right here because it's important to define the word science right now. Most people be like, they'll say things like, you have to believe the science. You have to believe the science. Let me help you understand another term that you might not have understood, right? I'll never forget when I first heard this and understood this. I was at Morris Brown College The professor says the word science, it was in a biology class, and the statement was this. He said the word science, he said scientia. He says you need to know what that means. He says that does not mean matter of fact. The word science, and you can look it up, the word science, the etymology of the word science actually means this. It means someone who is trying to get an understanding. Let me say that one more time. Someone who is trying to get an understanding. What that means is when you say trust the science, there is nothing to trust. They're gathering information, right? They're trying to fact find and put things together. If you notice that scientists are always attaining more knowledge because they have not arrived. It's very difficult to figure out God. Let me just pause right there, right? You may think you know something, but we are always gaining new information as it pertains to who God is. All right. So just want to pause right there. All right. Oh, hey, thank you, Brother Eddie. Appreciate you, Pastor Eddie. Appreciate it, man. All right. So let's keep going, guys. And I do apologize if I'm taking my time. But as I said earlier, we kind of have to build a case. All right. So if you engage in sex, you have the potential to have a child, right? God commands us to have children. If you do have a child, you need to understand that from the very beginning, you have a human inside of you when the sperm and the egg meet. Bottom line. All right. So seed reproduces what it already is. Sperm means, that term spermata means seed, right? So it reproduces what it already is. All right. So next, here's what we need to think about, right? The next question is, what is a child, right? What is a child? So what species, right, or category could you put a child in? All right. Simple answer, human. If you go against this innate premise, the conversation loses its logic from the very beginning. All right. So if you're not communicating that a baby is a human, the conversation, it immediately loses its logic. Because last time I checked, if you have any sort of insurance, insurance can only be had on humans, right? So if the baby isn't a human and you have medical insurance is only befitting for humans. That's just one example of logic being blown out of the window, right? Last time I checked, if you want animal insurance, you have to go purchase animal insurance. It is specific, right? Car insurance is specific to car insurance. Health insurance is specific to humans, right? There's a company called Humana, and it's called Humana for a reason. And that's because it is pertaining to those who are human. And I'm just going to give a couple of light points because, as I said, time will get away and this study will get away and, we'll never be able to get back to it. But that's the first thing I want you to understand. A child is a human. Next thing is this. When we talk about this whole conversation of rights, right? So you have pro-life and you have pro-choice. All right. We're going to kind of get into defining generally what they believe, right? Because sometimes you can't fully explain each individual that is in those particular groups. That's the first thing you need to understand. You can't box people into those groups. There is a general statement that is communicated pertaining to those groups, but everybody is human, and they can move on further, right, from how we generalize them. So that's another thing. But here's a conversation about rights, right? There's this conversation about rights, the conversation about right and wrong. There's conversations about justice, right? All of those things presuppose that you have like this moral base. And what I mean by that is when you talk about rights, when you talk about right and wrong, when you talk about justice, you are communicating that you have a standard that you have gotten from somewhere. All right. Now that standard has to come from a particular place as it pertains to rights, right? When you say you have a choice, you can do this or you can't do that. You need to, honor your body. A man shouldn't tell you what to do with your body. That is a moral standard that you've gotten from somewhere. It just didn't arrive, right? And so if you know that there's a moral standard, then you have to know that there is someone who is giving the moral standard. All right. So if you talk about rights, first and foremost, you need to understand now you've entered into a conversation of morality. Anytime you mention rights, you are talking about morality. Okay. You can read John Locke. His arguments, his whole argument for, this issue of property and things of that nature. He argued from the position of rights, right? From rights and morality, right? And he talked about inalienable rights, those things that were given by God. That was John Locke's argument. That argument made its way even into the Americas. You've heard that term, inalienable rights, in the Constitution. And so, as you can see, theology and the word, you can't separate theology from politics. That's the other thing. You can't separate God from politics. He's everywhere, right? Now, what you choose to do with him in your politics is different, but you cannot separate him from your politics, okay? So we're talking about rights and your choices. Now, as it talks about as you talk about your rights and your choices, you now are communicating you have a moral standard. And if you communicate you have a moral standard, then you're communicating that there is one who gives a standard. We got to get that out of the way. Okay. All right. We're trying to track logically through this thing. All right. So here's the next thing I want to communicate. All right. And that is this. Next thing I want to communicate is that, as I said earlier, we know what some things are. Okay. That's important to understand. We know what a human is. We make these distinctions between embryo and babies, right? And I said earlier that innateness trumps science. What you know in here is greater than science. You know what it means to be a human. Okay, you know what it means to be a human. And this whole thing of science is just an attempt, to understand something, right? And because we know what other things are, we know what humans are because we've got the inside information. Humans have human rights. All right, we can just pause right there. Humans have human rights. Now, keep that in view of a baby. A baby is a human. I got a question for you, or a question for you to think about. At what point, at what age, at what stage does a human gain human rights? All right. The civil rights leaders would probably like to talk to you about that as well, right? Those who used to be enslaved would probably like to ask you some questions in regards to that as well. At what point, right, does a human engage in having these human rights? John Locke spoke on this also again. They're inalienable, meaning they are from birth. These are things that are God-given that you cannot take away. A baby has human rights because he is a baby. All right. So humans have human rights, and you need to think, at what age are those rights given to humans, right? And you have human rights because you are a human. Now, I want to show you something in the world that we live in, this world of pro-choice, this world of pro-life. I want you to kind of see some of the hypocrisies that go back and forth in this world. Now, if you murder a woman who is pregnant with a child and both die, your charges would be a double homicide. All right. Your charges are going to be a double homicide. I want to provide for you proof of that matter, something that just happened here just recently. I want to give you or show to you an article that just happened I'm just going to briefly read this article. This is in Tennessee. And it says, man charged with 2 counts of murder after pregnant woman shot to death in Cordova Walgreens parking lot. This is in Memphis. Okay, this is near Memphis. All right, Memphis, Tennessee. It says a Memphis man was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. All right, let's pause right there. A Memphis man was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder after a pregnant woman was found shot to death in Cordova. Kevin McKinney was arrested Thursday after authorities say he was positively identified as the shooter by a witness. On August 20th, officers responded to the Walgreens at 9028 Walnut Grove and found Kiera McNeil suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. She was pronounced dead on the scene. Authorities said in their report that McNeil was 6 months pregnant. All right. Authorities said in their report McNeil was 6 months pregnant. The baby did not survive. According to investigators, McNeil went to the Walgreens to meet McKinney, the father of her child, to discuss co-parenting. McKinney was reportedly not happy about the pregnancy and had been pressuring the woman to have an abortion. All right. So we'll just pause right there. If you'd like to investigate this particular article, this article took place, I had the date here and I do apologize. Man, oh yeah, here we go. Tuesday, January 9th, 2020. Tuesday, January 9th, 2020. I'm sorry. Posted August 28th, 2020. All right. And then it was updated August 29th, 2020. All right. So I show you that to communicate that a baby is a human. This man was charged with 2 counts of murder, one for the woman, one for the baby. All right. Now that is the legal system communicating to you that this is a baby. Now this same legal system will also say that it's okay to have an abortion. So you see the nature of politics as it pertains to this whole issue of abortion. You need to be aware of it. It's paradoxes, right? It's hypocritical nature. You need to see those things, okay? Because the same government, you do one thing on one side, it's a woman's right. You do something on the other side, now you've entered into the point of double homicide, right? One for the woman, one for the unborn child. Okay. Now, I'm just putting this out here. These are some things for you to think through, and that's why you need to make sure that God is the final say as it pertains to any matter. Scripture says that God has given us everything pertaining to life and godliness. The Bible is a sieve, right? You run everything through it. I don't care what it is, right? I don't care what it is. You need to make sure you run that thing through the scriptures. You need to run everything through prayer. Say, God, is this okay with you? Guaranteed you're going to get an answer, right? Guaranteed. And so we need to understand those vital points as it pertains to this. So just a couple of quick other points and then we'll be finished here. And I'll kind of summarize this whole issue. But the one thing I want you to see too is that morality, right? Having that moral base is dependent upon your reality, right? The things you experience, right? So we see this situation of this double homicide with this man and this woman, right? Your morality, the things that you respond to, right? They're dependent upon the things you deal with on a regular basis, okay? Civil rights, they're founded on the basis that the offended persons were humans, right? The whole issue for civil rights was based on their reality. This grouping of people were denied their civil rights. They were offended and denied what was due them, right? Their inalienable rights. Therefore, you had civil rights. So you see how your morality is dependent upon your actual reality, okay? So these people, when they talk about civil rights, they're talking about their deserved civil liberties and freedoms, okay? They were denied those things. Humans have civil rights. Humans have human rights. humans don't have animal rights. All right. And if you think about this, we talk about animal rights. There are some things that you cannot do to animals, right? There are things that are considered incorrect or inappropriate as it pertains to dealing with animals. All right, so those are some things that we need to kind of keep in our mind as we continue on, or you discuss and think about this whole issue of abortion. And then another thing you want to consider is, oftentimes when we talk about matters, humans don't argue seriously about like subjective things, right? We don't argue about subjective things. We always argue about objective issues, right? Pro-life and pro-choice both agree that it's wrong to kill an innocent human against their will. Now I'm gonna pause right there. Pro-life and pro-choice both agree that it is wrong to kill an adult, innocent human being against their will. Just think about that. All right. Both parties agree with that. Both parties are willing to put you in prison if you behave in that way, i.e., the article that we just read. Proof positive, right? No one disagrees that what that man, Mr. McKinney, did to that young lady and the baby was wrong. They both would agree. All right. Now, here's what you need to understand. Either everybody has rights or only some people have rights. Think about that. As it pertains to the baby, as it pertains to women and men, it doesn't matter, right? The enslaved, either everybody has rights or only some people have rights. So when you think about this baby, it being a human, right? Does it deserve to live? Or are you able to make a decision for that baby that results in catastrophe, death in this particular case? So those are some things you need to wrestle with. Either everybody has it or only some people have rights. All right. Now, let's talk about abortion, right? In this manner, abortion is wrong because it's the taking of a life that does not want to be taken. That's another thought you need to place in your head. It's the taking of a life that does not want to be taken. Okay? That baby's not saying, hey, I'm here, kill me. That's not the case. And I'm going to make this argument really quickly. If you think about what a baby does in its existence, the baby is living inside of the mother, is feeding, is growing, and then there comes a point in time, that third trimester, right, where the baby is violently trying to escape the place that is living in to enter into a new living space. The baby has a desire to live. The simple fact that there's a heartbeat, the simple fact that he eats food, right? The simple fact that he has a residence, and that residence for the period of time is within the mother, but he is doing the same things that humans on the outside do. He is trying to live. And so abortion is wrong because it's the taking of a life that does not want to be taken. All right. It's against the will of the baby. And so we talked about earlier that most would agree that it's wrong to kill or take the innocent life of a human. All right. The baby has a will, right? And this baby is desperately trying to escape this womb. Okay. So these are just logical points I want you to wrestle with. All right. I know it may not all tie together today, but I do want you to think through some of these things, and you'll see where I'm headed here in just about 3 minutes. All right. Another thing I want to point out, there are no subclass of humans, right? And we do this often, and I want to show you this. I pray that you hear me on this point right here. I pray that you hear me here, because this is what I call vital. All right. This is very, very important. Okay. Humans have a propensity to depersonalize. I'm going to break this down for you. Depersonalize means this. They look at a black person, they say, oh, he's not human, right? He's not deserving of civil rights. He can't go to school with me. He can't drink out of a water fountain with me, right? They look at the Jews. Oh, he's not fit to live. We need a particular Aryan race, right? They look at the Irish. Oh, they're the scum of the earth. Don't allow them to come to the new world. They look at the Chinese, right? And they depersonalize people groups. People depersonalize other peoples, right? Now, the same is done for unborn babies, right? We do it though by convenience, right? We do it by convenience. When we want to get something done, we'll figure out a category, right, to place something in order to complete what it is that we want to do. Knowing what we know, knowing the basic agriculture. We know if we look at fruit, right? We know some things about fruit, right? But what we do is we like to place things into subcategories in order to accomplish our goals, okay? And we do that in the case of abortion. We come up with subcategories, right? We become Darwinian all of a sudden, right? And so we talk about the stages of a human life. We talk about it being an embryo and a fetus and an infant. We call it young, then mature. Then we'll say, oh, you know, it's now an older person, right? But I want to tell you something. The stage of a human doesn't disqualify it as being a human. It doesn't matter the stage, right? Whether you be 7 years old or 7 months old or 7 weeks old, you are still human. And we do that in other areas of our life. We do that with one of the greatest examples, I believe, is the whole issue of slavery. It was a categorizing. It was a subhuman class, right? And we're not just talking about slavery here in America. I'm talking about slavery in general. That happens all the time, whereby which that person is beneath me. He's not what I am. Therefore, we depersonalize. He is less than. You will now enter into a subcategory, not deserving your civil liberties, not being on the same human level that I am. All right. That's something I want you to hold on to and understand as it pertains to this issue of abortion, this issue of depersonalizing. Oh, all of a sudden he's a fetus. Oh, a fetus is not real? Yes, a fetus is real. It's a human, right? It has a heartbeat. It has the doctors are able to hear heartbeats. The baby has feelings. All of these things are true. And we do this when we want to get something accomplished. We come up with subcategories. All right. Now, final point, and here's where I want to go with this. Many people argue that the Bible doesn't give specific rule on abortion, right? That it only gives general principles. I don't know about you, but I truly appreciate the general principles of the scriptures, right? One of my professors, he used to make the statement, he used to say the Bible doesn't talk about sniffing cocaine or shooting heroin, but he says, I bet you know it's a sin, right? I bet you understand that it's bad for you. I bet you know that it's something that's not good for you, right? You can ask those users of heroin or cocaine and they communicate, hey, this isn't good for you. Where's the moral standard, right? Where's the general principle? How did they arrive at that general principle? So general principles are still things to live by, right? They're still the guardrails that help you travel down life's highway. And so, yes, the Bible does not give a explicit, and there's a great distinction I'm going to make here. The Bible doesn't give explicit rule on abortion. And even what I'm saying there is incorrect. And I'm going to show you why what I'm saying is incorrect. And matter of fact, I want to give that away now before I'm looked at as a heretic. God says in Exodus chapter 20, he says, do not murder. Do not murder. Now, you need to understand what murder is. Murder is the taking of an innocent life. Period. I'm going to pause right there. Murder is the taking of an innocent life. God says, do not murder. There's a distinction between murder, right, and killing. You kill your food, right? Let's be honest. I know that sounds hard, but we do. We kill turkeys. We kill cows, right? We kill in order to have food, right? That is the willful knowledge of taking a life for sustenance, right? God has given us that commandment. We are allowed to do that. He told Adam that he has free reign in that department, okay? But the one thing we can't do as it pertains to taking a life is murder, all right? Murder is the taking of an innocent human life. Baby is a human. God says, do not murder, right? Now, are there some other areas that we could cover? We talked about incest. We talked about all these other types of things that could qualify as possible points of allowing abortion, right? All right. That would take us a minute to deal with. And we can probably come back to that. But I want to leave you with this point. You need to first wrestle with God's point of do not murder. Me and my wife had a great discussion on Saturday as we rode in the car. We both went silent when we came to this point, right? And my wife does a great deal. She says, well, what if, and I forgive me, but she did make this point. She says, what if one of our children was in a position where they were raped or something, and they were at a point where they had to have a baby? She says, what will we do, right? And we wrestled with it. We were honest. We were like, man, that would be hard, We wouldn't want this to happen to our child and things of that nature. And then my wife said this. She says, but God says, do not murder. She says, what do we do with that, right? And that's the thing with God. When God gives you a command, you have to wrestle with it and see what he is saying, right? All these other things that are in between, yes, they exist, but what do you do with the standard, right? What do you do with the standard? Do you subvert the standard, go around it? No, you got to deal with the standard. He says, do not murder, period. Right? And you got to understand, when you go around God's standards, there are consequences. And you can look in the Bible at the consequences. There was infanticide. What that means is the killing of young babies, right? You can read back in Exodus. God commands that the babies of the Egyptians 2 years and younger, that they be killed, right? That was a judgment. You can see that oftentimes throughout the scripture. And so you have to wrestle with standards, right? And before I get off of here, there's a couple of things that we didn't talk about that I think is very important. Wrestle with Exodus, right? God's statement of not murdering. But then I want you to understand what Roe versus Wade is. Take the time out to understand what Roe versus Wade is. Take the time to understand of how they arrived at Roe versus Wade. Before Roe versus Wade, y'all need to understand, it was taught that babies were human. It wasn't till the ruling in 1973 that they made this distinction and said, you know what, babies aren't human anymore. That was upon scientific information, right? And we know what we just said about science. It's an attempt to try to understand something. So previous to that, 1973, a baby, right, whether it be 1 week old or 1 year old, was a human. Just keep that in your cap, right? Remember, I told you, politically, they'll do anything to fit their standard or fit their need. Okay, so just keep that. Understand. I wanted to give you the pro-life position. I got about 2 minutes here. I wanted to tell you the general belief of pro-lifers. That position is pro-lifers believe life begins at the instant of conception. I believe that as well. Call me pro-life if you want, but I would prefer biblical, right? God says life begins at the very beginning of conception. All right. Therefore, abortion is murder and is prohibited by the 10 Commandments, Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. I just gave you that. They strongly support laws banning all or almost all abortions. Now, that's important to know now. They support laws banning all or almost all abortions. So you got to do your homework to find out what a pro-lifer truly believes. What's the almost all? Pro-choice position. They believe that abortion does not differ fundamentally from other forms of birth control, and they strongly support the right of a woman to make her own choice about abortion, free of any legal constraints. Think about that now. Imagine if you had no legal constraints. All right. The Bible talks about those who choose to be what's called lawless, right? Without law. So they will not inherit the kingdom of heaven, right? Law is made for your benefit, okay? That we just need to put that in there. Pro-choice. They point out that legalized abortion does not force anyone to have an abortion against their will, and they say that the laws against abortion amount to forcing a religious doctrine on to people of other faiths. All right, that's their position. Now it's up to you to investigate it and find out the magnitude of that particular position. All right, a couple last points here. People have reservations about both pro-life and pro-choice, right? They talk about morality and separation of church and state and illegal abortions. These are some of the issues that are attached to both sides, right? And as I said earlier in conclusion, you know, the object is not to get political on abortion. You don't want to get political. You want to stay with the standard. The standard is provided through the scriptures, with the Bible, with God. That's how you judge any issue, right? And so you want to stay in that particular thing. And then here's the other thing you need to understand too, guys. Constitutional does not mean biblical, right? Let me say that one more time. Constitutional does not mean biblical, right? Slavery was constitutional, okay? That is not Bible. All right, so you need to understand that because the government allows you to do it does not mean that it honors God. So you keep that in your mind, right? And understand that. Okay. So there was just a couple of things we wanted to kind of talk about. And it's a lot to wrestle with here, right? So when you hear issues, I want you to understand that God has already spoken to those issues, and it is the duty of the church to deal with these issues for the purpose of enlightening you as to what God has said. The Bible deals with this type of stuff, right? You can read Exodus chapter 1. You'll see Pua and Sapphira as the king of Egypt comes to them and he says, hey, listen, I need you to kill every baby. When these women have babies, I need you to kill their babies, right? He's talking about the Jewish women. And Pua and Sapphira, they said, we can't do it, right? There's like, these women are strong. When they have their babies just shoot out. And they said that for the sake of preserving human life, right? They were not going to kill babies, but the king of Egypt told them to do so. That's found in Exodus chapter 1, right? So if you want to see a story where human life is preserved, right? So just want to put that out there to you guys. I appreciate you tuning in and staying with me for a little longer study today. If you have any thoughts or you'd like to discuss, feel free to DM me or reach out to me any way you know how. I have the information there. But feel free to, again, share this if you'd like to as well. And I look forward to meeting with you guys again next week for Bible study, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. And thank you, Miss Linda. Truly appreciate you. Thank you for sticking with me. I know it's a little bit longer. And also, I look forward to seeing you on Sundays. We're walking through the book of Philippians, and we'll be talking about advancing the gospel, right? Advancing the gospel. So I look forward to seeing you guys at that time as well, Sundays at 10 a.m. All right, good people. Thank you for giving me your time. I pray you all have a blessed week, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. All right, y'all. God bless.